crossing dimensions of time and space. Technology beyond comprehension. They are watching. They are waiting. They are already here.
I was scared to death.
It wants us, let's go, let's go, let's go.
With U.S.-Soviet tensions running high, an American-run NATO facility in England is under the strictest security. U.S. Airmen Jim Penniston and John Burroughs patrol the base perimeter in a vast wooded area known as Rendlesham Forest.
My rank was Airman First Class. I was a law enforcement specialist.
My job at RF Woodbridge was in charge of base security. It was a heightened time of the Cold War. I got a call on my radio. There was this sense of urgency in the security controller's voice.
We were heading down the Eastgate Road to check the gate to make sure it was secure.
Eastern Radar reported that there was a unidentified bogey on the screen about 15 minutes before. That made it look very probable it was an aircraft that had crashed. That's the only logical explanation of what was going on. And we proceeded toward where the lights were in the forest.
It appeared the forest had like a white glow to it. At one point, the boy said it looked like kind of like a Christmas display, different colored lights coming on and off.
As we got up to the tree line, the whole situation changed. I knew it was an aircraft crash. It was void of things such as the smell of burning fuel, the noise the fire creates in the woods. Our radios started to break up, and that was unusual.
There was a loud shriek that went off like something was startled or very, very upset.
It went from a possible aircraft crash at that point in time to a possible security situation. There was scurrying of animals running away from the area. It was very strange. I thought we were in trouble, yes, in trouble. I had a situation in front of me I had never, ever, ever encountered. I was scared to death.
There was a bright flash of light.
It blinded us. As I started to get up off the ground, what formed was a silhouette of a triangular craft that was probably about 20 feet in front of me. I was just totally perplexed by it. As I walked up closer to it, I could feel electricity jumping, like on my clothing and skin, hair. It looked like black glass. It was very shiny. But in the actual skin of this craft, running through it, was different colors. There would be globs of whatever, blue and orange. I was looking for crew compartments, intake, exhausts. It wasn't aerodynamic. I mean, it had no flaps and didn't have anything that normal aircraft would have to fly. I paced off the side of the craft and measured about 9 feet long, about 6.5, 7 feet high. And as I started walking around it, though, I got a glimpse of some type of writing on it. My first reaction was, oh, thank God. It's going to say United States Air Force on it. It's going to say NASA on it. And to my disappointment, it wasn't writing. It was like glyphs, pictorials on the side, which made it even more of a mystery. These glyphs were, they measured about 3 feet long and about 5-6 inches high. I ran my hand across. It was like sandpaper. It was very rough to touch. There was a larger one above it, a large circle with a triangle in it, and I touched that one. I couldn't see anything around me. All I could see is this bright, intense white light. They didn't stop. The intensity of it did not stop until I took my hands off of it. And in a blink of an eye, it was gone. There was no air displacement. There was no sound. I mean, it's impossible for an aircraft to do that. What kind of technology is that? I was just overwhelmed. What just happened to me?
There it is.
Whatever it was shot straight up above the trees.
We ran after it because we thought it was going to re-land. When we seemed to get close to it, it would get farther away.
And we had no idea what we were dealing with.
Security Patrol 1, please report.
10-4 Eastgate. Returning on foot.
Whatever it was departed out towards the coast. We were pretty amazed what we had just seen happen.
John and I were discussing, like, how can we explain this? How can we go back and tell them all that we have seen?
Why are you drawing that?
Well, I'm drawing what we saw.
Well, I didn't see that.
What do you mean you didn't see that? You're with me.
I didn't see that.
There's a difference in memories between what Jim remembered happening as we hit the ground and what I remember. What I saw was a red oval type sun-like object. From the time I hit the ground until the time the object departed was a very brief period of time. I didn't see Jim walk around the object. I couldn't really explain what it was or give any rationale behind what I saw.
As we returned to Eastgate, there's no discussion at all in the vehicle on the way back. I mean, we're just speechless.
What time you got?
4:45.
Upon getting back to base, what seemed like being out there of only a period of 45, 50 minutes, something like that, was actually more like 2.5 hours. Well, I tried to write the time issue off as adrenaline, but I couldn't make that work.
So we weren't sure what we were dealing with, but we knew we needed to go back out there and take a look around in the area.
On the morning of 26th, we headed back out to the Eastgate. Was I scared? Sure. Sure, I was scared.
What do you got?
I wanted to know what was going on.
After witnessing a mysterious craft in England's Rendlesham Forest, U.S. Airmen Jim Penniston and John Burroughs are missing time, and their memories don't match up.
I had no idea what we were dealing with. I had nothing to compare what I was seeing to anything that I've ever seen before. After we briefed the shift commander, we decided that we were going to go back out to the area because it was daylight to get a better look around.
On the morning of 26th, we headed back out to the East Gate. Was I scared? Sure. Sure, I was scared. But having evidence or having something physical to say this happened was paramount.
What do you got?
9 feet.
There was 3 indentions in the ground, triangular, all equal distance apart. That was the landing site.
What's that?
There was damage to the trees. There was tree limbs on the ground and damage to the canopy above. That made it more real. We were trying to draw some correlation to something military or anything out there that could explain what we were dealing with.
We were in training all the time for aircraft identification. Everything from Russian aircraft to, Warsaw Pact type aircraft to Chinese aircraft. So we could readily identify them just by their silhouette. But it didn't fit any mold of any type of aircraft I've ever seen in training or have been taught to understand.
There it is.
Whatever we were dealing with that night is something I've never seen any military craft be able to do.
Nick Pope is a former UFO analyst for the British Ministry of Defense.
December 1980 was a period of extraordinary international tension. It was all about dealing with the potential threat from the Soviets and the Warsaw Pact. I theorized that a Soviet craft of some sort might be responsible. Some spy plane or unmanned aerial vehicle. Maybe the strange symbols that Jim Penniston saw were actually the Russian alphabet.
I knew it was a Russian aircraft. The glyphs are perplexing. They were completely foreign. I think the closest thing I could foresee that to be was something maybe Egyptian, maybe.
The U.S. military has a long history of top-secret aircraft with unique design characteristics. Dr. Scott Miller is a professor of aerospace engineering.
A lot of stealthy aircraft are going to have this deltoid planform. It's very, very common. And the lights are typically located on the extremity of the aircraft, so that can create a very strange pattern. Probably the strongest interest in trying to introduce technology to reduce the radar signature started happening in the Cold War. The U-2, there were variants of that airplane where they were trying to make it much more stealthy. The SR-71, the Blackbird, and its actual even darker, blacker variant of that airplane developed by the CIA called the A-12 were intentionally designed to have a much reduced radar signature and a reduced infrared signature and create strange perceptions by people if they see them at night.
But everything an aircraft would do, this did not do. It had no engine sound or nothing like that. There was no sound at all. I mean, it's impossible for an aircraft to do that. The technology was so advanced, it had to be something far beyond what we were capable of producing. When I finally got to bed, I was having trouble sleeping. I was very agitated. I couldn't get these ones and zeros out of my mind. And every time I shut my eyes, I could see them. I got up because I couldn't get to sleep. I grabbed the notebook that I had out there that night, and I started looking through it again. Then I decided, well, those ones and zeros, I can still see them, so I might as well record them. And the more I wrote, the better I felt. But you don't dare tell anybody. What if I told my commander that? The part about the ones and zeros. I'm sure they would have thought it was a breakdown. It would have been a career ender. I retired the notebook. I put it away.
While Penniston tries to forget the strange encounter, Burroughs hopes to learn more. 2 nights later, he returns to Rendlesham Forest with a group of airmen led by Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt.
There was more activity outside Woodbridge Base. The on-duty flight at the time again saw strange lights in the woods. Colonel Halt was selected to lead a group of guys out into the forest to try to make sense of what was going on.
Colonel Hall at the time was the deputy base commander for the 81st Tactical Fighter Wing at RAF Bentwaters. He was second in command for the base.
I just wanted to know if it was back again or what we were dealing with. I was looking for a rational explanation. Colonel Halt brought one of his little microset recorders with him. He was doing little short clips on what they were dealing with.
Almost pulsating.
He said they'd seen strange lights in the sky flying around, and he pointed to two that looked like they were like doing a grid search. All of a sudden, in front of us, we had a blue transparent light come streaking towards us. And then a white object kind of appeared up above and then floated down and was sitting out there in the distance. I asked him for permission to go towards it to see if I could get a closer look.
Yeah, go with it.
As we started going towards it, it appeared to start to come towards us. Sergeant Stenzel was on my right. He went down to the ground. He saw me go into the light. He saw me disappear. He saw the light explode. And I was gone for several minutes before I reappeared. I have no recall of it. I have no memory of what happened. The next thing I know, I was standing in the field and whatever it was gone.
John?
It was like, what just happened?
What the hell was that? John?
If you listen to what Sergeant Peniston says, at one point, the bright light exploded. And Sergeant Bustinza saw me go into it, and that's what happened. After the incident, I went down to let Jim know what happened on Saturday night and into Sunday morning.
A few days later, I was called up to Colonel Halt's office along with John. We listened to the tape.
They are moving at extremely high speeds.
We had a real-life encounter going on that was being recorded as it happened.
I think Halt was trying to reassure us. I'm confirming what you guys see. It happened again.
I don't know, sir.
I was actually relieved because that means it was no longer just on John and I's shoulder. It means that we had other people in the Air Force that can confirm a second sighting on it.
But before Peniston and Burroughs can solve the mystery of what they saw, they are contacted by the Air Force Office of Special Investigations.
We received a phone call to report into OSI.
It's clear to me that the people involved in it, the aftermath of it, aren't happy that we're doing what we're doing, and they definitely could be threatening to us if we continue this.
This isn't what I wrote.
The incident was to be kept quiet.
Where's the rest of it?
In December of 1980, Jim Peniston and John Burroughs witness an unusual craft in Rendlesham Forest. While Burroughs and several other airmen document a similar encounter 2 nights later, Peniston, fearing for his military career, tries to forget what he saw.
I was very concerned that there was going to be a further investigation, more prying into this situation. I received a phone call to report into OSI the following day. They wanted me to write a full statement. They were very adamant and clear about it. They said, you write exactly what happened out there, everything. I was intimidated. They are serious. I mean, they told me that, you know, either I cooperate with them, tell them everything, or that's it. The career, it's done. And I said, well, am I going to lose my job over this? And they said, no. They said, we want you to explain everything as it happened, and then it's over with. Exactly what I wanted. I wrote a 4-page handwritten account of what happened. I told him about the flash of light, told him I had contact with the craft.
But then Penniston is presented with a deal he didn't bargain for.
15, 20 minutes later, they came back in, couldn't call it in. They have a type page, about a quarter of a page, maybe a little longer. They made me read it, I think it was 2 or 3 times. So it was very sanitized. It was very generic. They says, and this is the official story, the official account that you tell anybody that asks about this.
This isn't what I wrote. Where's the rest of it?
And I thought that we had a code of conduct and honor, and you know, you wouldn't write false statements or nothing like that. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. But OSI can operate outside the realm of normal chain of command. They were completely within their span of control to do that. It did not sit well, but orders are orders. That's how it works. It was disturbing. I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't a war criminal. And that's the way they were treating me, like I was a captured spy or something. I think the government knows this is of significance. I believe that they don't want the public to know.
There would have been a number of very good reasons to keep this secret. Firstly, I think no government on Earth could admit that our sophisticated air defenses are effectively irrelevant, and that we're facing a technology that we simply have no defense against.
Penniston and Burroughs comply with the order to keep the incident secret.
It was best for this to be, you know, let sleeping dogs lie. And that's what we did.
I departed the base on a normal 2-year rotation in July of 1981. After the incident happened, I did my best just to stop thinking about it.
But that proves impossible.
I started not feeling well.
I experienced a number of different things that were related to the initial contact. I started experiencing dizziness. I was having inner ear problems and balancing problems. Three years after the incident, I was stationed at my next base, and I had a heart infection that came up. It was very rare.
After I left Bentwaters, I started having more problems, and I ended up being diagnosed with a heart murmur. The doctors that were working with me couldn't give me an explanation on what was going on. We didn't find anything out until they released the British document.
The British government is in the process of declassifying and releasing its entire archive of UFO files.
An official report states that Colonel Halt and his team returned to Rendlesham Forest days after the second sighting to investigate.
Colonel Halt recorded the levels of radiation, and these were written up in his official report into the incident that was sent to the Ministry of Defense.
Nevels, can I get a reading, please?
The colonel went out with a team which included a disaster preparedness NCO, Sergeant Nevels, and he had a Geiger counter, and he recorded the levels of radiation out there on our landing site and in the immediate area.
Strange.
The peak readings in radiation turned up in 3 indentations that had been found in the forest floor. The Defense Intelligence staff assessed that the radiation levels had been significantly higher than background.
I made the connection that dizziness was caused by the radiation from that incident, because that was the one thing that the medical personnel were asking me about, if I was exposed to radiation. You know, I had a dilemma there. They said, so do I bring up, I'm not supposed to talk about the incidents, so do I bring up I had radiation exposure, or do I lie to the doctors and say that I never had? And I followed my orders, and I said, no, I had never had radiation exposure, even though I knew I had.
When I came in the Air Force, my entry physical clearly shows I came in with a clean bill of health. When I got out in 1988 of active duty, my exit physical shows that I had several issues with my heart. There's no explanation other than the fact that right after the incident I started having heart issues.
Given the assessment of the radiation levels at the landing site, I believe that the government and the military owes John and Jim an explanation.
But with the military refusing to provide any answers, it's up to Peniston and Burroughs to solve the Rendlesham mystery on their own.
We finally came to an agreement that I would go under hypnosis to see if I had anything came up involving, once I got close to it, if anything came out.
How do you feel?
It's calling to us to come to it. We've got to go to it. It's telling us to come to it.
I was possibly pulled up into it.
It wants us. It wants us.
Following an encounter with a mysterious craft in Rendlesham Forest, Jim Peniston and John Burroughs suffer from increasingly poor health, and the U.S. military is unable or unwilling to explain why. Forced to search for answers on their own, they turn to hypnosis.
I went out to California where the hypnosis was conducted. The guy that was doing hypnosis at that point did a very good job about just letting me tell. The hypnosis lasted between 2 and 3 hours and went through a pretty good detail of the incident from beginning to end.
Roger, we copy, we copy. We're moving in slowly. It gives the impression of an object, but it's mostly light, all light. It's calling to us to come to it. We've got to go to it. It's telling us to come to it. We can feel it.
During the hypnosis, it comes out that I did have some kind of interaction with something out there.
We've got to get to it. We've got to get to it. We've got to know what it wants.
It's very clear in my hypnosis. I was being drawn towards it.
It wants us. It wants us. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
I was possibly pulled up into it. I believe that I was inside whatever it was while Sergeant Peniston circled the object. It gives a decent explanation on why I don't remember Sergeant Peniston walking around it.
You want to go by now?
Further sessions explore what happened during Burroughs' second sighting, when he met with Colonel Halt in the forest.
The hypnosis goes into a little bit more detail the second night.
The lights are back again. I said, wow, I knew they were coming back tonight. Weird thing. We had things over on top of it. They were making contact with their mind.
The object wanted me out there.
I'd like to get another look.
Yes, go. Pistinza, go with him.
What is it, sweetheart?
I'm in something.
What are you in?
Don't know. My mind is in something.
I believe that I did end her something. That I was inside.
Whoa!
It's all right, sweetheart. What is it?
Oh, there was like 20 of them.
What do they look like?
Little specks of blue lights.
I have contact with something from somewhere else. I'm having a dialogue with them.
What are they? Oh, they're coming at me. Now it's getting bigger and bigger. like milky white object or substance. It just keeps going up, down, wider, smaller. Then there's an eye or something behind it. The hole's opening up.
Do you see anything in the hole?
No.
What does the hole mean to you?
Clearly I had some kind of interaction with an intelligent something.
Dr. Mark Schneegert specializes in astrobiology and the search for intelligent life beyond Earth.
Life originating someplace else in the solar system or the galaxy and being either accidentally or purposefully brought to Earth is in the realm of possibilities. Intelligent life on another planet could be very different than intelligent life on Earth. The organisms may not have hands and eyes. They may not walk and talk like we do. They may use their intelligence in different ways to be successful. But it's much harder for us to conceive of and much harder for us to look for because we have no examples.
I'd never seen a UFO prior to this, so I had no way to know whether it was possible or not.
Like John Burroughs, Jim Penniston remains haunted by the events of December 1980.
Before that night, my perception of UFOs, meaning that ET, alien, that kind of thing, they never existed. I mean, we were safely alone in the universe. Then it all changed coming out of that woods that night. I was only getting maybe 2 to 3 hours sleep a night. So that's when it was suggested that I get a psychiatrist and maybe help me with the sleep disorder. During my hypnosis, there was a large jump in time from the time of being out in the woods.
His therapist is unable to penetrate beyond the moment Penniston touched the craft.
Stuff that I just can't remember. And she says, something traumatic happened to you. I always skip over that and go back to being interrogated at OSI. No matter how she tried, she couldn't break that.
No, I'm with agents again.
And she says, that is a sign of a memory block being put in. Things to prevent me recalling what happened. She said, I've never seen it before. I've only read about it. All I remembered was the first time I went into the OSI building and gave my initial statement and wrote it all out.
You just can't talk. You can't tell them. Okay.
Under the hypnosis, there was more encounters with being interrogated at OSI.
Did they do something to you physically?
Yes. Shot.
It involved having sodium pentothal given to me.
Where did they give you the shot?
Sergeant.
I've told you everything.
You can do this all day and night.
Jim Penniston.
I can't see why they would treat a member of their security force like that.
Drugs, in this context, could have two distinct purposes: to get to the truth or to hide the truth. The Americans and the British would be absolutely horrified if the entire complicated and effective air defense network had been so totally compromised that a craft could just get through like that. Everyone would have a reason to keep quiet about this.
But repeated sessions with the therapist begin to break down the memory block. Years after an encounter with a strange craft in Rendlesham Forest, Jim Penniston undergoes hypnotherapy and discovers a memory block. Repeated hypnosis sessions reveal he was involved in a second unsettling interrogation at OSI.
I didn't remember that I had been back down to OSI. I didn't know I went back through that.
And they look to the night of December 25th, 1980, for answers.
The only thing that I couldn't recall was the 45 minutes out in the woods, where I would jump to the being back at the main base.
Looks like right. I can't. I got a touch source.
You touch the glyph. What's happening?
I see the craft.
It's a white light.
I started remembering, and as I remember bits and pieces, all of a sudden those bits and pieces became chunks, and the chunks became a full story.
Their mission is contact with us. They are time travelers. They are us.
They are us from
The future.
When I first heard myself on these films saying this, I thought it was another person talking. It was all in disbelief because it's beyond my thinking, that kind of stuff. What I knew about time travel to that point was a movie that came out in 1960 called The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. That was it.
Is time travel anything more than just fantasy? Dr. Ron Mallett has dedicated his career to studying the controversial theory of travel through time.
Time normally flows in a linear way from the past to the present to the future. However, Einstein's general theory of relativity says that time can be altered by gravity. The stronger gravity is, the more time will slow down. Black holes can be thought of as sort of natural time machines because a black hole causes an extreme bending of space, it causes an extreme bending of time. This means that the closer you get to a black hole, gravity is getting stronger and time is slowing down. So if you get near the edge of a black hole, time comes nearly to a halt. If I can twist time into a loop, then I can go from the past to the present to the future by using light, circulating light. You can cause a twisting of space, and this twisting of space can lead to a twisting of time. One can only go back in time to the moment that the device was created. It's the device that creates the effect.
I actually did not think the time travel was possible, but I'm starting to wonder if it's the only explanation.
Through hypnosis, Penniston uncovers one more buried memory.
The light was just a constant light. It whited everything else out. I couldn't see anything else. And then all I seen was ones and zeros coming out. It was like crazy.
I can see the binary code.
During that hypnosis is the first time I heard the words binary code. And it was done in the context of when they asked what I was seeing, I respond by saying,
I can see the binary code.
Alexander Furwarn is a professor of computer science.
Binary is a mechanism for encoding a language. In a sense, a human language like English is a code, right? So we're encoding ideas into that language. Binary simply lets you do it in a different way. Binary code is commonly used to encode secret messages. Around 1980, binary was not well known. We were in the process of putting our toe into the binary computation for the home market.
Looking at Jim Penniston, I'm not sure I see here a guy who, back in 1980, would have been able to write binary code. He's not a mathematician. He's not a cryptographer. He doesn't know binary code.
But during the hypnosis, I actually call it binary code. And I said, this binary code is from time travelers, it's from the future, and these people are us.
Colonel?
In spite of credible witnesses and physical evidence, the military remains silent on the strange object seen in Rendlesham Forest in December of 1980. No longer willing to keep quiet, Jim Penniston and John Burroughs turn to hypnotherapy to uncover the details of the encounter, which leads them to one last piece of the puzzle. A mysterious pattern of ones and zeros known as binary code.
I kept the notebook. I always felt that they had a meaning of some kind. I had an independent company go ahead and look at the codes.
The actual problem with binary code is that unless you have a way of decoding it, the actual code itself, the zeros and ones, can be interpreted in many ways. If only a single person did it, well, that is, that person's opinion. If 3 independent people did it, then perhaps it's not their opinion. Perhaps there's consensus. And if the message is consistent, then you have a code.
I sent them off to an expert in Australia, an expert on the eastern seaboard of the United States. And they independently deciphered them and came up with the same information.
It was a shock to me when there was actually a message.
They're here for the exploration of humanity. That's what the code said.
Further independent analysis of Penniston's binary code reveals something even more shocking.
It showed 7 geographical locations.
Longitude and latitude can certainly be represented using some type of binary code. In fact, a modern GPS system relies on being able to tell you where you are using a binary code.
The 7 locations have been deciphered, and they show places around the world.
There's a point in the American Southwest, which is Sedona. There's a point in Central America near Belize. There's a point in South America near the Nazca lines. There's a point in Greece, a point in Egypt, and a point up in the mountains in China.
Gave a grid coordinates west of Great Britain, which is what they called High Brazil. I believe the significance of these areas are they're naturally occurring electromagnetic areas.
These electromagnetic fields could be possible gateways to other dimensions. If you go to these sites, there's glyphs, there's drawings on walls showing some kind of encounter with something from outer space.
Penniston and Burroughs now believe they experienced some kind of contact with time travelers from the future. But the military still doesn't acknowledge that anything unusual occurred in Rendlesham Forest.
I believe they're well aware that the incident we had happen that night, it was an incident that involved this type of phenomena.
The official word from the United States Air Force is that nothing happened at RAF Bentwaters or Woodbridge on the dates in question.
I don't rule out the possibility that this was extraterrestrial, but neither can I say that I've seen or am aware of any definitive proof. So far as I'm concerned, this incident is unexplained. When I've met Jim and John, there's a certain haunted look in their eyes. When I speak to them about this incident, the tone of voice, you can tell they are still troubled by this.
Every step toward getting an answer, the better off we are.
I'm more concerned about closure. finally understanding what we encountered in the field back in December of 1980.
When we find the answers and what it was, it ends for us. We want our involvement with the incident to stop. That's all.
This terrifying information to come out, so that there'll be people in a camp of, oh, there are good ones and there are bad ones, and we're going to choose sides, and it's Star Wars all over again. I mean, this is like, a wet dream. I hate to say that for the intelligence community to have people, brainwashed this way. And what I think that, when I met years ago, I got a document. It's in the film very briefly, Sirius, which you can see at our website, SIRIUS is the name of the film, and it came out last year as the biggest crowdfunded film in history. And what happened is, in this document, although they didn't spend much time on it in the movie, I would have liked to spend more time, is that it was from the Strategic Studies Institute, and it was talking, this is 1996, about creating a global abduction cult and to simulate human being abducted by aliens that would be done with very advanced aircraft and the stagecraft of creatures that look like aliens but aren't. And this document is in black and white, and it's an authentic document describing this program. Now, if that's all there was, I'd say, well, that's interesting. But then I've met with so many men and women who've been in these projects. I remember talking to a man who had been in a program back in the 70s. It was the late 60s and 70s where they were doing this. And he says, oh, yeah, back then we didn't have as good a stagecraft, as they called it, as we do now. But we were able to get these anti-gravity devices and have people appear to be aliens. And they would use various chemical substances, electromagnetic weapons, and they would engage in various types of abductions and also mutilation events back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and for livestock. And he says we were doing that because we knew that that would make its way into the tabloid media and the UFO subculture and begin to start this slowly snowballing effect of fearing everything alien. So that's sort of how the game is played. It's been played for thousands of years by despotic demagogues, whether they be religious figures or political figures. And there's always an agenda behind it. The agenda behind it is to manipulate people through fear. And I think that, one of the big challenges of this era right now is for people to transcend and see through that. And it's like the old Who song, we won't be fooled again. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people have been fooled. And the idea that these programs aren't very well funded and extremely sophisticated in the technologies they have, it's just a wrong idea. They are well funded, albeit illegally, and they are very sophisticated in the technologies they have, and also in the ability they have to stage something and fool people. So I think you have to view so much of this with an eye of, it's sort of like, is it real or Memorex? The old commercial years ago about the audio tapes. Is it actually an ET event, or is it something masquerading as ET or alien for the purpose of psychological warfare, like the Benowitz case that everyone probably knows about, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations case back in the day in the near Sandia National Laboratories in Kirkland Air Force Base, where they really did stage not only a human abduction, but a whole series of things and documents to put people off the course. Now, what a lot of people don't know is what they were really trying to hide, aside from putting out the false information, is that there was a woman that Paul Benowitz knew that had actually seen near Kirkland and Sandia a man-made anti-gravity propulsion device that looks like a UFO. And in order to sort of brainwash her into thinking that was not ours but alien, they set up this whole series of things that Richard Doty and others were involved in. And I think that this is a real problem because, you can't take things at face value, and when you do, you're going to find that you're just being played by some very sophisticated people who have a lot of experience manipulating mass markets and mass media and subcultures into a certain type of reactive or reactionary perspective. And I'd say, well, you can never prove a negative, so you can never prove that there are no civilizations out there that may not have our best interest at heart. But let's say even if that were true, what's your response going to be? Is your response going to be more war, i.e. Star Wars, interplanetary systems that are going into war? Well, if you understand technologies that are these scalar electromagnetic weapon systems, you can take out an entire planet with a system like that. So if hydrogen bombs and atomic bombs would leave the world uninhabitable, these systems are even worse than that. So there is only one path forward, and it's peace. And it's not as exciting as a horror film about aliens. It's not as titillating about finding a new group of people. You can't overtly be a racist, and you can't overtly hate women, or you can't. Now they're wanting to find a way that people can overtly hate something. Well, what's the next something? Well, it's another system out there, another star system that we have to hate. It's a very convenient thing. It's tragic, but it plays into this sort of collective experience of humanity in our recorded history of ethnic groups, religious groups, political groups going to battle, going to war. And you look at the last 100 years, we've killed something like 200 million of our own species in warfare on this planet, and often for things that are just ridiculous. And yet that's something that is, unfortunately, one of the chief organizing principles of the current world order is an us versus them military, industrial, centralized governmental complex. And if they really want to be able to take that to the next level, they've got to find another enemy. So this is, I think, what's really deeply behind so much of the information that tends to scare people and turn people into these sort of dualistic camps of us versus them.
Now, Dr. Greer, we are an extremely primitive species with this tribal warfare. Like you just said, these 200 million people that were killed. And obviously the next step in evolution is people need to realize that, we are the same because there's others out there. And isn't there some sort of federation, galactic federation out there that's awaiting us to ask them? Or are they waiting for us
Absolutely.
to have peace?
There is. I mean, there's a very large network of interstellar civilizations that have been observing our development for a very, very long time. Now, my view on this, stepping back and looking at the last, say, 100,000 years, most of which isn't recorded, it's been a process of humans going from tribes to city-states, Greece and the Trojans, and then going to nations and nation building, and now to something resembling of an interconnected global society, although highly dysfunctional. And then the next step, obviously, would be to become interglobal, interplanetary. However, that ticket, to get to that next stage, the requirement is that you have become at least nominally civilized so that you're not murdering each other by the millions. We haven't made that leap yet. So unfortunately, our technology has advanced enormously, from, muskets and cannons and things of this sort in the 1800s and 1700s to thermonuclear weapons and things that are classified weapons that are even more fearsome, as well as technologies that are very, very advanced. So we have developed technologies ahead of our social and spiritual development, and that is exactly the window, that's exactly the period when a species such as ours is at greatest risk, not only to ourselves, but I know I sound like a doctor here, but not only dangerous to ourselves, but dangerous to others. Now, interestingly, if someone comes into my emergency department, I'm an emergency doctor by training, who's a danger to himself or others, they get committed to a mental facility. And, I had a friend who was a Harvard psychologist. He was hilarious, and he had an encounter outside Washington that was amazing. And he said to me, he says, yes, well, the Earth right now is the intergalactic insane asylum because we're acting completely like a bunch of crazy people. And I said, yeah, I know. So, one of the things is we have to become nominally sane. And it's not that we're going to all become perfect or enlightened. I'm not, and I doubt anyone listening is. However, we can at least stop murdering each other by the millions and setting up these systems that are designed to manipulate people into larger and larger and more expensive battles. And I think that's something that can only be changed by the people, because there's so much power that is centered at the top of this food chain of exactly what Eisenhower warned us about, the military-industrial complex, which is now the military-industrial financial laboratory research complex. And at the deepest levels of it are folks who really do want to be able to maintain control over not just American or British population, but a global population by presenting an existential threat that is not human. And I think that drives so much of the agenda of the false information, the concocted cases, the stagecraft. Now, have there been people who have been horrible victims of this? Yes. And, a lot of people, when they've heard me say this, say, well, you're not very sympathetic to people who've been injured or abducted. I said, no, I'm very sympathetic. Where I differ is the conclusion of who's doing it and what's behind it. There was a physicist who used to work out at Pine Gap, the facility near Alice Springs in the center of the continent of Australia, and brilliant man. And he was talking to me about how they had been manufacturing for years these creatures that look like aliens, but they're actually man-made kind of bio-nanotechnology creatures that have been used in abductions and have really been very persuasive for a lot of people thinking that they had an encounter with an alien when it was actually something that people were making that was some excellent stagecraft. And I say excellent in the sense of very well done, but diabolical and absolutely evil. And so I think that, until you get do a really good research on this and begin to drill down that, since the 80s there have been people who have concluded that, it's not just MK Ultra at the CIA that was doing experiments on people. There are all kinds of experiments that have been done with some technologies that most people wouldn't believe humans have. But it's because they're assuming that the technologies they know about, such as might be at MIT or Caltech or Oxford or Cambridge, that's the state of the art. It is not the state of the art. The state of the art of the technologies are unpublished in deep black projects that are in these underground facilities near Edwards and the Nellis Range, what people call Area 51, but nobody in the business calls it that. And these technologies that are in the hands of the big corporate titans, such as Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and SAIC and E-Systems and Raytheon and on and on and on. Those technologies are highly classified and are, most people, if they were to see them displayed, would say, oh, that's got to be alien. Well, it's not. It's just that they don't know how far these technologies over the last 50 years of studying not just science in general, but also recovered and downed ET craft have advanced, and they are substantial. So this substantial growth in technology that's classified and is not known by the general public would almost certainly fool anyone who would see it. I remember back in the early 90s, it was after I briefed the CIA director for Bill Clinton, I had a man pull me aside. He says, we have technologies that are so good that if we want to have somebody have a conversation with their personal God, a Jesus, a Buddha, whoever, they'll have it, they will think it's real, and they will pass a lie detector test that it happened to them. He looked at me square in the eye. This guy, it was chilling. And I said, what are you talking about? At that time, I thought this has got to be nonsense. And he went through a lot of this, and I went, oh, my God. I mean, and this is why, research on this issue is not simple. It's like an onion you pull back, and you pull back 38 layers, and you think you've reached the core of it, and you've got 50 more to pull back. So it's not a simple issue.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Greer. You're saying that the technology is so superior right now that they can mimic an alien abduction, mimic UFO flights and anti-gravity and this. But when you're doing your summoning events and having your CE5, could this be possible again? Technology that might be man-made, and you might be, being deceived again.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we've had both happen on the same week-long training event. But by the way, I just want to mention to people, there are 2 spots still available for the week after the Joshua Tree event. We're going to do the thing that Sunday night's open to the public. Then we're going to do a small team training for an entire week up in Joshua Tree that begins that night and goes for an entire week to the following Sunday morning. And that's limited to, I think, about 25 people. But there are 2 spots left, so if anyone has that week and wants to do it, they can go to SeriousDisclosure.com and find out. But we have had that happen. I'll give you a great example. One time we were up in you probably know where Sedona, Arizona is, and we were up in that area, and we had an amazing sighting and contact with actual ET craft and these translucent beings that were around us, very ET. The craft were seamless, this and that. And then later, we had a disc fly over, but it had 2 jet fighters escorting it that was 100% man-made. It was a man-made anti-grav that was going from the south to the north. I suspect it was headed up towards the Provo area, the Dugway Proving Grounds, which is an underground area there south of Provo. That's one of the state-of-the-art facilities now in America. Most people don't know about. They always think of Area 51. I say, yeah, that was a cool place in the 60s and 70s. But so this event, everyone there are like 30, 40 people there, looked up and they, what the hell is this? I said, well, that's one of ours. So, yeah, I think people have to have enough knowledge, and I think this is one of the things that I try to train people when I do these expeditions with them is to say, look, here's the characteristics of an actual interstellar transdimensional extraterrestrial vehicle and these beings. Here's what we have that I know about that are classified projects. There are distinguishing characteristics. Now, if it's too far away and there's not enough information, you have to say, well, gee, I don't know if that was one of ours or one of theirs. And I think that, but if you don't even have that, in medicine we talk about differential diagnosis, so that if somebody has chest pain, there are like 115 things that can be. One of them is a heart attack. But if you don't know about the other 114 other things, you're going to miss a dissecting thoracic aneurysm, which is, of course, what killed Princess Diana. So you have got to have enough knowledge and information. What I find is sort of difficult in the UFO subculture is that people aren't drilling down at the depth that they need to, because the people studying new energy and anti-gravity and secret aircraft programs don't give much. Some of them don't even think any of it's ET. A lot of the people involved with the ET and so-called alien issue don't know about the other. You really have to put all of it together in a comprehensive bit of information, and this is what I've been trying to bring forward. It's difficult because people want simplistic answers, but it ain't simple. If it were simple, this problem would have been solved before I was born in the 50s. So I think that's why we as a people have to begin to say, this has got to be childhood zen now. We have to have a mature understanding of this issue, but not only in terms of how interstellar civilizations might appear in our time and space and how we might make contact with them, but what are the capabilities within the deep black programs at the Lockheed Skunk Works inside what's called the Cube, the big underground cube area near Edwards Air Force Base. What are the capabilities within, out at Pine Gap in Australia? What are the capabilities that are electromagnetic weapon systems or systems that could simulate an event? You have to know all of this in order to actually go out there and understand what's happening. And if you don't have that comprehensive amount of information, it's like a blind man holding on to an elephant, and you may be holding on to the back end of it. So I think it's a complicated issue. It's not insurmountable, but one can't take a facile, and it's not a trivial issue to get all this information around into a comprehensive paradigm. And that's what I didn't know 24 years ago when I started the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the Worldwide Disclosure Movement. I knew about some of this, but between 1990 and the year 1998 or so, I went through a very steep learning curve from people who were on the inside of these projects. I mean, as you know, I have an uncle who was Northrop Grumman and worked on the lunar module, the thing that put the first man on the moon. So I had a lot of contacts. When I began to learn what our capabilities were that were classified, that are 100% human, I went, oh my God, this is a really complex issue. It's not as simple as people think.
So when I know Dr. J, and we have some guests on the line that want to get some questions into you, Dr. Greer, like Johnny Webb all the way from the UK, but I wanted to get this in. The false flag event, is it on or off the table by the powers that may be? A major invasion, CNN posted, and then there it is. Everybody knows that here's the extraterrestrial. We know we're not alone. Is this on the table, off the table, and how are you going to know if it's not legitimate, if it's one of ours or if it's the real deal?
Well, first of all, interstellar civilizations have no need to invade here. I mean, I think, with all due respect to Zecharia Sitchin and others, no civilization needs to come here to get anything we have here. We don't need to be turned into slaves digging up gold. If you understand the technologies of interstellar travel, you can materialize any element, any material you want through resonance field frequencies, and I can get into this later if you want to talk about it. So this is not something that, there's no real reason to come here. And by the way, they estimate there are 11 billion Earth-like planets in our own galaxy, the Milky Way, which is one of billions of galaxies. So anything that's here on this planet is abundant throughout the universe. So there's no need, if you can travel from one star system in one point in space-time to another by going beyond the speed of light through these other dimensions, there's no reason that there'd be that kind of an event that would be for their own self-interest, number one. Number two, what you ask about this false flag event, what people haven't understood about what I'm talking about is that event has been going on for 50 years. In other words, since Eisenhower lost control of these covert projects in the 50s, they have been putting out disinformation that has been tailored to create within the Hollywood, science fiction, and UFO subcultures this sort of aura of fear and of alien invasion and fearing all things alien. And I think this is something that people don't understand. It's a long-term project. So Werner von Braun, when he was talking about this, he was talking about it, in 1974. That was 40 years ago. So it isn't like this is something that's just like a singular event that's going to happen. It's an ongoing disinformation and counterintelligence project that all of us have been victims of. Are
they going to get it on a world scale, though, like CNN all at once? Is that on the table, or
Sure, that's something that I would say that's something that's possible in the future, and I think people would have to be very, very careful about how they evaluate what's going on. I mean, I wish we had been so careful about the claims about the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq before we went up and completely dissembled that country. And look what we have now, probably what's going to become the biggest terrorist and radical state in the entire world, much worse than Afghanistan. So I think that what people have to begin to do is they need to question this. And if it's on CNN or any other major network, you really need to question it. I hate to say it, because, those guys are often just basically taking dictation from the right hand of the king. And I'm quoting, that what I just said, taking dictation from the right hand of the king, is what a very good friend of Mike Wallace at 60 Minutes told me up in New York back in the 90s, a guy named Schwartz. And Schwartz, this guy told me, he said, look, he says, I used to think we had a free press. He says, and he had been dealing with Mike Wallace on some of this stuff, dealing with these Majestic documents and other things way back in the 80s and 90s. He says, what I found is that basically the big media cannot cover and will only portray things that they are ordered to do because they're corporatized. And those big media corporations are vertically and horizontally integrated into the system. So, I think that something certainly could be done like that. Now, the other issue is that you can have an authentic ET event, and it could be spun into something that is an invasion. For example, I'll give you a great example. Back during the darkest days of the Cold War, as you know from the Disclosure Project witnesses, then many of our intercontinental ballistic missile, our nuclear missile silos and facilities were overflown by ET craft. A number of cases where, like in Minot, North Dakota, where you had 16 to 20 intercontinental ballistic missiles, thermonuclear weapons, that were rendered unlaunchable all at the same time. Now, at the same time, the same era when that was happening, Sam, I remember talking to Sam Donaldson of ABC News about this, that was going on in the Soviet Union with their nuclear weapons, but in a different way. And basically, a captain who was there in the Air Force at Minot, North Dakota, said he really felt that the ETs were saying, don't blow up this beautiful planet. But if you do launch, know this, we can intervene so you don't destroy all life on Earth because this Earth is precious. He really got that vibe. And I said, well, of course that's what they were saying. If they wanted to come in and just invade and sanitize the whole Earth of all this stuff, they could do that probably in a couple of nanoseconds. The problem is that would look like an invasion. So it's sort of a catch-22. They're waiting for us to fix this problem because if it's done from outside, number one, we're not going to learn any lessons and evolve. And number two, it will be portrayed by these special interests as an invasion when it isn't, when they're simply trying to help or prevent something disastrous. So I think we have to look at this in a much wiser way than the sort of the paranoiac and sensationalism that permeates this issue right now. And that's one of the more difficult things for people to accept, because to be thoughtful about this is really difficult, and to be reactionary is predictable, but cliche.
Dr. Greer, we got a break in a couple minutes, but real quick, I wanted to give Blake any last words before he goes.
Well, certainly, we're going to be getting on location and working on our latest production. It's a feature-length film. Everybody keep an eye out for it, Hangar 52. And, yeah, Dr. Greer, I think you're going to dig what you're going to see in this film. Maybe you don't quite know the angle we're going to go at it, but definitely it's not a horror movie, but it is a thrill ride, and it's inspirational for humanity. Do you think there's good people in power that, they're looking out for the human race, and that's why everything's still together? Everything's not falling apart yet. Are they still in control?
Well, control is a very big word. I would say there are certainly good people in all walks of life who want us to make it through this challenge. And, a few months ago, I